All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm back again. Yes. Coming here live in effect. So y'all notice that I do video twice a day normally. Um, so yes. So I want to finish where I had started off earlier. Earlier I was dealing with the Daily Black History with the history about Anna Julia Cooper and Janie Porter Barrett. So first I did Anna Julia Cooper, right? I was talking a little bit about her history, expounding her information and whatnot. So I did her video. So now I want to go ahead and focus on Janie Porter Barrett. And who was she? She was an educator and she was a social worker. So what I want to do is I want to look at her biography. But make sure if you are watching from the YouTube channel, always subscribe, share, and like this channel. But if you're watching from Facebook, you can go ahead and share the video on Facebook by all means. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Okay. All right. Okay. So here it is. This is the picture of Miss Janie Porter Barrett. All right. This was her when she was young. Very beautiful. Now we're gonna get into the story about her life. Okay. Here we go. This is her again later on in life. All right. So Janie Porter Barrett was an American social reformer, educator, and welfare worker. She established the Virginia Institutional School for Colored Girls, a pioneering rehabilitation center for African American female delinquents. She was also the founder of the Virginia State Federation of Colored Women's Club. Now let's look at her early life. All right, so Barrett was born in Athens, Georgia. Barrett was born in Athens, Georgia on August 9th of 1865. Her mother, Julia, was a former slave. Barrett's father's name is unknown. However, he is thought to have been Caucasian because of Barrett's fair skin. And just like Anna Julia, she didn't know who her father was. So this is the same way. Her father wasn't around either. But let's continue. The Skinners, a Caucasian family, hired Barrett's mother as a live-in housekeeper and seamstress. And if you guys don't know what a seamstress is, that's somebody who can sew, sew and make clothes and stuff. The Skinners pampered Barrett and educated her along with their own children. As well as receiving an education in literature and mathematics, Barrett was exposed to privileged and refined people. Her childhood was a typical of the African American community of the time. Barrett's mother married a railway worker and lived with him while still working for the Skinners. But Barrett continued to live with the Skinners. Mrs. Skinners wanted to become her legal guardian so that she could send Barrett to a school in the northern USA where Barrett could live as a white person. Julia vetoed this plan and sent Barrett to the Hampton Institute in Hampton, Virginia, where she would live as a black person in a black environment. Now here it is, torn in between the two. So the family that she was staying with, right, which was the Skinners, they wanted to send her off to a school up north so she can live as a white person because of her fair skin. But her mama said, no, my child is not, no, because she got a black mama. So my child's going to stay right here and she's going to go to school out here and she's going to be around her own people. So no, we're not going to play that politics. We're not going to play that game. So her mama wasn't having it. Okay. So you got to remember at that time period, Someone who was light skinned, like my complexion or lighter, they could pass up for white. Or it was maybe not my complexion, but anybody that was a real fair skin, they could pass up for white. They could pass up for white and as an opportunity. That's how it was back then. So sometimes they didn't have to know that you was biracial or that both of your parents were African descendant, right? But they happened to have fair skin themselves. They didn't, they wouldn't have no way of knowing that because you can pass up. And that's what happened with a lot of black people who were light skinned at that time period. That's what they did. So anyways, let's continue on. Okay. Then it goes on to say Barrett had never lived among African Americans before attending the Hampton Institute. She also had to do manual labor for the first time at the Institute. Hampton emphasized vocational education, and women were trained in morality and housekeeping in preparation for careers as wives or domestics. Barrett gradually adapted to the system at the Institute, and she was especially influenced by a novel about culture and advantaged woman similar to herself who devoted her life to social service. While at Hampton, she began to volunteer for community projects that help people. Barrett trained as an elementary school teacher at the Institute. The Institute taught her lessons in love of race, love of fellow men, and love of country. Inculcating her with altruistic and patriotic values and a sense of duty towards her race. So at the end, she realized, she understood why her mama sent her to Hampton Institute. She understood why. She's like, okay, now I get it. My mother want me to understand what it's like to be black and live in an American society. She want me to be able to be exposed to all this. So I got a call and duty. I enjoy what I'm doing. So now I want to be dedicated to my own people. All right, so let's continue on. Okay. It says Barrett graduated from the Hampton Institute in 1885. She worked as a teacher in a rural school in Dawson, Georgia, and then at Lucy Craft Laney's Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute in Augusta, Georgia. She taught night school classes in the Hampton Institute from 1886 to 1889. In 1889, she married Harris Barrett, the Institute's cashier and bookkeeper. They had 4 children. And it says Lotus School Social Settlement. Soon after she married, Barrett began holding an informal daycare and sewing class at her home in Hampton. The class grew rapidly into a club that tried to improve both home and community life. It was formally organized as the Lotus Streets Social Settlement in October 1890. It was the first settlement organization for African Americans in the United States. In 1902, the Barretts built a separate structure on their property to house the settlement numerous activities, which include clubs, recreation, and classes and in domestic skills. They receive assistance from Hampton Institute students and faculty who also found several philanthropists who were mostly from the northern USA to fund the settlement. By 1909, the settlement had clubs for children, women, and senior citizens. Committees supervised these clubs, and Barrett concentrated her effort on large-scale annual events. Now, it goes on to talk about the school that she organized and she founded. It says here, Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls. In 1908, Barrett helped to organize and was the first president of the Virginia State Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. The Federation engaged in a wide range of social services. It helped in the provision of environments that were appropriate for children rather than their place in institutions like jails and alum, houses. Ooh, I never heard that term before. What is that? Let's look up what the term alum houses is. I never heard of that term before. Okay, so we gonna learn together. Okay, so alum's house, also called poorhouse or county home in the United States, a locally administrated public institution for homeless aged persons without means. Such institution radically declined in number in the second half of the 20th century, replaced by other means of subsistence and care. And also said, dating to colonial days, the almhouse was used as a dumping ground for the mentally ill, the epileptic, the mentally retarded, the blind, the deaf and dumb, the crippled, the tuberculosis, and the destitute age, as well as for vagrants, petty criminals, prostitutes, unmarried mothers, whoa, and abandoned and neglected children. Operated often in conjunction with a farm with emphasis on meeting costs through the sales of farm produce, the almhouse or county home incurred widespread criticism after the turn of the 20th century for its failure to provide differentiated treatment for the varying problems presented by residents, the minimal character of medical and nursing care offered, the low sanitation and safety standards, the physical and mental deterioration of residents caused by neglect and incompetence of the management. These evils were gradually but not altogether eliminated by the shift of the sick, the handicapped, and the young to specialized state institution, a process that began in the middle of the 19th century and the transfer out of able-bodied age who could qualify for old age assistance under the Social Security Act of 1935, from a peak of probably 135,000 in the early 1930s. The population of county homes dropped to an estimate of 88,000 in 1940 and to 72,000 in 1950. Residents in 1950 consist largely of age infirm individuals. Closing and consolidation reduced the numbers of homes from 2,200 in 1923 to approximately 1,200 in 1950. So basically, the almshouse is the county home. It's similar to the homeless shelter, but it's not quite the homeless shelter. So it's a place where those who are considered to be unwanted, right, such as those who had disability, those who were single parent, those who was neglected children or foster children, or homeless, those who were old age, they was all dumped in the house. So they were pretty much isolated away from everybody else in society. And they had no proper treatment. So it's like basically putting them in the ghetto. But we're going to talk about the history of the ghetto later on. Sometime this week, I want to get into the history about the origin of the ghetto. But yeah, with that being said, at that time period, if you lived in a poor house, you was going to get a lot of ill treatment. You weren't going to get the proper care that you need. So this puts you in the mind of the ghetto. You know, those who consider as unwanted, then get dumped off in the ghetto. In the area where it is based on what was used as a trash disposable area, people living in poor conditioning, lack of maintenance, things of that nature. All right. But let's go ahead and go back to Jane Porter's story. Okay. Anyways, for it says, for several years, After 1911, the Federation gradually raised money for the establishment of a residential industrial school of young African American girls that were being sent to jail. Wow. They planned to pay in full for land after 5 years of fundraising. However, in 1914, Barrett read in a newspaper that an 8-year-old girl had been sentenced to 6 months in jail, and she immediately appealed to the judge in Newport News, Virginia, to send the girl to a Weaver Orphan Home in Hampton, where Barrett was living at the time. The judge reluctantly released the girl into her care. The Federation quickly raised $5,300 and bought a 147 acres farm in Hanover County, Virginia, and chartered their center. Wow. And it goes on to say the center was a rehabilitation center for African American female juvenile delinquents and was called the Industrial Home for Wayward Girls. It opened in January of 1915 with 28 students. After several name changes for the center became known as the Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls, with advice from many prominent social workers and especially from the Russell Sage Foundation. The school developed a program that stressed self-reliance and self-discipline. The school had academic and vocational instruction, visible rewards, big sister guidance, and close attention to individuals' needs. In 1915 and 1916, the Virginia Assembly appropriated more funds for the school, and Barrett was named secretary for the board of trustees. Uh, Harris Barrett died at about this time. Barrett also turned down a job as dean of women at Tuskegee Institute. She became superintendent at the industrial school. One of her fellow trustees at the school was a suffrage and activist, Mary Cook Branch Mumford, who had assisted in its creation. Barrett was deeply involved in every aspect of the industrial schools program. She personally managed the parole system, by which girls who demonstrated sufficient responsibility were placed in carefully selected foster homes. These girls also were given jobs and were supported by follow-up services such as ministerial guidance, a newsletter called The Booster, and personal letters. The school operated on an honor system and did not use corporal punishment. A special feature of Barrett's work was that each resident had their own bank account, so that upon discharge, each resident had some money to take with them. Wow. And it says Barrett excelled in her role at the school. Her childhood had equipped her to deal with the socially important white women who controlled the trustee board and who were able to influence the state legislators to appropriate funds for the school. She said, we cannot do the best social welfare work unless, as in this school, the two races undertake it together. She was held in such a high regard that she could demand the future Caucasian employers of her students treated them humanly. While industrial school was under Barrett's supervision in the early 1920s, the Russell Sage Foundation rated the rated it as one of the five best schools of its kind in the United States of America. At the time, its enrollment was about 100. The school became a model of its type, with many successful rehabilitation of young women who were able to find employment and get married after being released. The school was known especially for its cultivation of character and morals. In 1920, the state of Virginia assumed Financial responsibility for the school. The state and the federation shared the supervision of the school until 1942, when it became supervised by the Virginia Department of Welfare and Institution alone. And then here's her further achievements. In 1929, Barrett received the William E. Harmon Award for Distinguished Achievement Among Negroes. In 1930, she took part in the White House Conference on Child Health and Protection. She served as the president of the Virginia State Federation of Colored Women's Club for 25 years. She chaired the executive board of the National Association of Colored Women for 4 years. Barrett retired in 1940. She died in Hampton on August 27, 1948. In 1950, Barrett's training school was renamed the Janie Porter Barrett School for Girls. It became racially integrated in 1965. The Virginia Industrial School exists as the Barrett Learning Center until 2005. Now, what an amazing work that she has done. She has went her way to create a school for girls who were considered as juvenile delinquents or troubled kids, or young girls who grew up as orphans, and they were sent to poor houses or county homes, or they were sent to juvenile. So instead, she said, you know what? I want to open up an opportunity for our young people, for our young females. See, I'm not just going to send them off or let them be sent off to jail. That's not going to happen. And these were African-American girls. So you got to remember, Black folks, we were treated like prisoners at that time, and still treated like prisoners. We were treated like outcasts, menaces to society. You didn't have to do shit. You could have just been minding your own goddamn business. But because you in the white community, you know what I'm saying, or you're around a bunch of Caucasian people, you looked at as an enemy for no apparent reason. So Black folks, ever since we got in this country, right, have you noticed that we have not really done anything to white people? But white people have done more damage to us than we have done to them. All because of social construct. Because of those social constructs, and because of that, it gave privilege to one group based on the color of their skin, while everybody else was considered as being inferior. So that one group wanted to have all the power, all the dominion and control over everybody. And that one group say, hey, if you don't comply with our laws, or if you try to cross this line, or you try to do this, that, and other, you're going to be sent over here, you're going to be sent there, you're going to end up being killed. So Black people was already demoralized before they even acted out of character. Black people were already labeled as criminals before they actually got a chance to become criminals. And then you want to know where all this criminality come from? Over the years of dealing with the oppression, epigenetics. And then they lock us away, lock our men away especially, but our mothers as well. Then we lived in dilapidated houses, projects, in deplorable condition, lack of jobs, and then your parents, your family, your loved ones, they begin to own and reject you because they start caring more about themselves, or they don't really care, and they start to create all of this has created a dichotomy in our community. So more and more kids end up being on the streets. More and more kids end up being in and out of foster homes. More and more kids end up in group homes, or they end up linking up with other children who are outcasts like them. So this woman has not received her credit either. Again, she has not been given her flower, her recognition. especially what she done for African Americans girls. Let's look up more information about this woman. All right, hold on. Let's look up more information about her. Let's see what they talking about. What else has she done? All right, so check this out. This goes into a little bit more detail about her schools, right? Okay, so this okay, so this one explains a little bit more about her life. It says that she taught in a poor rural county in southwestern Georgia. Right, for a year, she enjoyed teaching there despite the challenging circumstances, but a chance to return to Hampton and teach in night school proved irresistible. At the 1888 session, she moved on to Lucy Lane's Haynes Normal, an industrial institute in Augusta, Georgia, and academy ambitious high school for black students. Laney, a member of the first graduating class of Atlanta University, was one of many dedicated teachers who sought to give a new generation of African Americans a way to rise in the world by plain living, high thinking, cleanliness, and godliness, coupled with academics and vocational training. So this woman was very similar to Anna Julia Cooper. They both had the same mentality of being able to give back to their own community and be able to set the standard, especially for black women and black people in general. Okay. So it says her husband was an influential entrepreneur. They live in Hampton. And rather than becoming another comfortable member of the developing black bourgeoisie, however, Janie Porter formed a sewing class for neighborhood girls that inspired the formation of other groups. She drew in their mothers, and soon the Lotus Street social settlement took shape. Just as Jane Addams and Ellen Starr opened up the doors of Hull House to their immigrant neighbors in Chicago, Barrett opened hers to her black neighbors. During the next 20 years, the settlement reached into every part of the Hampton community. Clubs and classes devoted to mothering, cooking, gardening, poetry raising, quilting, rug weaving met every afternoon and evening. She encouraged children to play athletics, games, and work to improve the community. When the settlement outgrew their own house, the Barretts built a clubhouse on their land. Now, check this out. It says Barrett's concern for young girls may have been inspired by the contrast between nurturing environment available to her own children and the horrendous condition in which many black youngsters were struggling to grow up. She often told of finding an 8-year-old girl in jail and becoming convinced of the need for a home for what were then called wayward girls. Barrett challenged the federation she headed to take up the cause and travel around the state collecting small donations. In 1912, the National Association of Colored Women met in Hampton, which gave her an opportunity to develop wider support and provide an additional source of funds. Okay. By 1913, she had enlisted the aid of a small nucleus of white Virginia women who were perhaps urged on by Mary Cook Branch Montfort, a prominent white club woman from Richmond, particularly interested in black education. Barrett always gave due credit to the white women and their clubs, though she recognized the greater constancy of her black supporters. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it goes on to say, okay, then it goes on to say the school embodied 19th century female values. Barry emphasized that it was a home rather than a prison and instituted a carefully structured system of rewards instead of punishment. Her purpose was to build Christian character. She strictly regulated the behaviors of girls, required them to be clean, and taught them household and agricultural skills so that they could support themselves as domestic servants or farm workers until they established homes of their own. Though Barrett patterned the educational philosophy of the school in some ways on those on yes, some ways on those of Hampton and Tuskegee Institute, she was unusually gifted and sensitive superintendent who stamped her own personality on the school. She believed in trusting the pupils and ran the school on the honor system. In a typical instance of her methods, when World War One created a shortage of agricultural laborers, Barry offered the services of her girls to help neighboring farmers bring in their harvest in exchange for a share of crops, thereby creating a body of enthusiastic supporters for the school. She also tried to prevent the exploitation of former students by employers in search of cheap labor. Year after year, in carefully worded statements, she criticized families, black and white, who failed to offer adequate support and encouragement to the young women who lived and worked in their homes. Okay. Oh, let's see. It says also Barrett's extraordinary ability to work with white women, facilitate perhaps by her upbringing, probably contribute to the growing support she garnered in the General Assembly and to her ability to raise money from private sources. The corporation of women like Barrett and Montford enabled Virginia, probably more than any other former Confederate state, to develop strong ties between white and black club women. The African American banker Maggie Lena Walker also gave generously to the school and organized a council of colored women in Richmond, which took responsibility for such activities as an annual Christmas dinner for the girls and staff. Little by little, the successful school received recognition and praise. In the mid 1920s, the Russell Sage Foundation identified it as one of the five best such schools in the country. All right. And then it goes on to say in 1920, the state took over basic responsibility for the school, though the Federation continued to be its mainstay. And Barrett continued to manage it until she retired in 1940, and she remained bold and innovative. In 1938, she wrote that she stressed training in citizenship and that voting is a duty as well as right. At that time, it took courage to tell government of Virginia that black women were being prepared to be voters. So basically, what she did, she prepared young African American girls for the world that they was going to encounter and that they was going to deal with. Right. And see, and then goes on to say down here in 1920s, Barrett took an active part in the Virginia Commission on the Interracial Corporation and in the Richmond Urban League. She served for 4 years as a chairman of the executive board of the National Association of Colored Women, and in 1929 she received the William E. Harmon Award for Distinguished Achievement Amongst Negroes. A year later, she was invited to take part in the White House Conference on Child Health and Protection. Okay. So how she passed away, she had diabetes and arthrosclerosis. Yeah, arteriosclerosis in Hampton Institutes, Dixie Hospital, and was buried in Elmerton Cemetery in Hampton. All right. 2 years after her death, the General Assembly renamed the school she had founded the Janie Porter Barrett School for Girls. And it was integrated in 1965 and became co-educational in 1972, an appropriate legacy in light of the work of its founding mother to bring about interracial understanding with a reorganization of the state's correctional system in 1977. The school became the Barrett Learning Center for Boys. Wow. Okay. So I want to show you guys something real quick. Okay. Oops. Yeah. All right. Right here. This book is called The History of Children Welfare. I'm gonna pull it up. Excuse me. It's called History of Child Welfare. The hell? All right, so let me go back. Oh no, that's not the page I was looking for, honey. Lord have mercy, that was not the page I was looking for. It was 135. One. All right, let me. Okay. So, yeah, the name of the book is called A History of Child Welfare, and it was written in 1996. Let's go down to the bottom. Let's scroll down. Okay. It was written in 1996 by Eve P. Smith, and Lisa A. Holligan Merkel. All right. Yep. So let's see what they were talking about in this book. All right. So over here it's called the Jane Porter Barrett and the Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls, Community Response to the Needs of African American Children. All right. So Wilma Pebbles Wilkins, and she wrote in this context, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a social ethos evolved among African American women that led to internal child welfare reform in legally segregated African American communities. This article described the nature of these child welfare developments and provide a historical example using the Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls. Prevailing themes derived from the historical account are discussed in a contemporary context. Whoa. So check this out. It says Virginia will not forget that she is indebted to the colored women of the Commonwealth for the industrial home school. All right. It says historically, African American child welfare services have evolved as a response to exclusion, right? Differential treatment, segregation, and other forms of racial oppression. Internal social reform and selective services for African American children have resulted from mutual aid orient responses on the part of African American churches and voluntary association, and benevolence originating from interracial cooperation, the work of Caucasian philanthropists, and governmental sponsorship. The Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls, founded in 1915, was initially maintained by the Virginia Federation of Colored Women Clubs through organized interracial cooperation. Existing today as the Barrett Learning Center, the institution responded to dependent and delinquent African American girls and exemplified the fulfillment of one of the national directives of the National Association of Colored Women, using guiding principles from educational theory and from the Child Welfare Department of the Russell Sage Foundation, right? The Virginia Industrial School, under the leadership of Janie Porter Barrett, provide convincing reform efforts by means of humanistic living and learning environment and preparation for transition to the community. All right. So let's see. Go on to the next page. All right. Hmm. Okay, so here you go. And it says Barrett's homeschool, internal child welfare reform and services by African American club women, like settlement house services provided by Lillian Wad and Jane Addams, reflected the personality traits of the founders. Such was the case with the Virginia Industrial School for Colored Girls, with its flowering landscape campus. And that's the name of the source right here. Noting that the Virginia Industrial School became a model school that other states tried to emulate, describe a visible atmosphere of trust and hope attributable to Barrett's personality. In addition to her unique skills in facilitating a growth promoting Malu at her home school, Barrett's skills in developing and maintaining interracial group support also contribute to the amount of financial and material resources available and the level of broad-based community endorsement for the school. Barrett's successful approach to delinquent African American girls was likely the result of a combination of her ability to effectively incorporate consolidation from Hastings, heart of the Russell Sage Foundation, and child welfare practices later promoted by C.C. Carstens, first director of the Child Welfare League of America. Okay. So let's see. I'm trying to see if there was criticism. Okay, and then goes on to say the school operated an honor system with each girl working towards becoming an honor girl, wearing the white dress and being promoted to Federation Cottage, the highest of the cottage, Discipline at the homeschool was strict, with team groups consisting of 10 residents assigned a lieutenant and a captain to monitor behavior. School matrons follow up on any necessarily disciplinary action. In addition to the merit system, silences were also used as a form of discipline. A biological account of Barrett by Sadie Daniel mentions, without giving descriptive detail, a thinking room for the development of moral strength. Right, one is left with the impression that the so-called thinking room was some form of isolation, resembling quiet rooms used in psychodynamic forms of therapeutic treatment for children who lose control. Okay. All right. So that's all for tonight. Dealing with the story of okay, so this is the name of the book, right? Right here. It's called A History of Child Welfare. And you can go on archive.org. Again, go on archive.org and find out more information. All right. So, and it was, got money. Okay. It was edited by Eve P. Smith and Lisa A. Merkel Hooligan. All right. So go on archive.org and look this up if you want to learn more information. All right, so I'm going to turn now. Okay. All right, so with that being said, you guys, that was a very insightful history about Miss Porter, or Miss Barrett, rather. She really made it her business to be not only nurturing but also the disciplinary person to help develop these young girls when society giving up on them and say, hey, we just gonna throw you away. And I wish that we had that kind of system in place to this day. Now, I'm not saying that there are any places like that, because I'm quite sure that there is some programs, but it's not enough programs. You know, it's funny that they build these prison systems, right? But they don't want to build something that would bring about rehabilitation to help you to grow and develop, to become a better individual and become a better survivor in society. And you know what? And let me talk about shelters for a moment. Someone had to put me on some game a while back. They said, you know what? You can't build a shelters without going through the voting process, for one. And two, you got to go through the politician, the mayors and all that, you know, get their permission. And if they tell you no, then you can't build a shelter. So there's been people that want to do, you know, want to build facility for those who are destituted, people who are homeless, you know, or being abandoned or whatnot, but they couldn't do it because the city and the city councils and the mayors would not allow them to do so. They would not allow them to put up any type of facility as such, because either A, they know that the taxpayer gonna have to pay more money, or two, they're trying to preserve the areas for business owner and investors so they can come in and buy up the property and put their businesses there so they can earn more profit and earn more revenue. I mean, excuse me, yeah, earn more revenue for the city, which they are, you know, for that local government. So, with that being the case, a lot of things can't be built and a lot of things can't be done because, everybody else got other agendas. And their agenda is not always catering to those that are in need, but it's catering to those who are wealthy. And that's just the way how capitalism operates. The wealthy people get the attention first before anybody else. And the poor people or those who are socially disadvantaged or underprivileged, they'll be the last person to get any type of recognition or any type of services that is necessary. And then you want to know why people don't vote. Because people say, well, shit, if I'm voting, then what that's going to do? These politicians ain't going to stick to their words. They're not going to do anything, whether it be a Republican or a Democrat. It's all about the agendas. So that's why I keep telling people all the time, if you're going to vote, look at the agendas first and foremost. Don't just vote for somebody because they belong to a particular party. Do not just vote for somebody because of their popularity. Don't just vote for them because of what they look like. Vote because based on their agendas. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. And like I said, if you watching from the YouTube channel, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If you're watching from Facebook, make sure you make sure you share my video on Facebook. And I will talk to you guys next time. So please be safe and take it easy on yourself. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. And we will talk later. All right. Deuces. Thank you.